Well, our next guest is a talented artist who has created many, many beautiful paintings. And when you look at his expressions of real life, it's almost impossible to imagine that he once tried to end his own. We'll find out why as we greet and say hello. Welcome to the 700 Club from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Stephen Gjertson. Welcome. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes,
Okay, wonderful. It's great to have you here. This is one of your pieces, and it is so beautiful. Tell me a little bit about your artwork. How do you describe your style or define what you're trying to do?
Well, I call myself a traditional realist because that's something anybody can relate to. It's been called by my teacher classical realism because of the timeless qualities that are expressed in it.
This is so rich and beautiful. I know that we have some of the other work that you've done, and I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about it as we take a look at it. Are we ready to show those pictures? Here's a...
Oh, that's a painting of my wife and my last daughter, our youngest daughter, was painted within a couple weeks after my daughter was born. That's a still life called an English table. That was a commissioned still life. People invited me over to their home. I picked out objects. She stipulated the kind of flowers I'd paint. That's a painting of my two daughters, my oldest and my youngest.
That's beautiful.
Did that up in my studio. That's a painting that reflects my own life experience, my desire to be crucified with Christ. I go up to the North Shore of Lake Superior almost every summer, and I like to paint landscapes up there.
That's a beautiful area, isn't it?
It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. That's a painting I call The Thoughts of Youth. That was my son. I took him up there one summer, painted him on the rocks. I used to do that when I was a kid. This is a painting that has been one of the most popular that I've done. It's called Heroes of the West, and I saw my son doing that one day.
That's
and,
great.
Decided I'd paint him. That's a painting called Homage to Fantin. Fantin Latour, the great 19th century French flower painter. I love his work. I love flowers, and I paint a lot of flowers. That is a triptych that I painted for a Lutheran church in South Minneapolis. It was a commission, but it was a commission that I donated my time to. I received no money for that, and I spent 2 years painting that. That's a portrait of my oldest daughter, Stephanie. Symbolic portrait when she was 16.
Now, what did you title that?
I entitled it Reflections, which is a play on words. She's reflecting on herself, who she is as a young girl maturing into a woman. This is a painting, landscape. I do a lot of landscapes. One of the ones I've done with animals, a lot of deer in Minnesota.
These are so realistic. It looks like you could reach out and touch them, almost like they're so real. They're almost like a photograph in a sense of the real thing.
I've learned to take that as a compliment.
Yeah, please do. That's why I said it kind of hesitantly. I thought I mean this nicely.
Yeah, I don't use photographs. I paint from nature. That's the way I was trained. That's what excites me as an artist.
Now, but let's take a picture like the one that's next to us right here. This is obviously like the one that we saw of the crucifixion that you said was your own story.
Right.
You don't have the real thing to paint from here, but you do in your mind's eye, I suppose.
It's a different type of painting altogether. We call it imaginative painting. It's where you're taking pieces and parts of the visible world and putting them together to make an amalgamation.
This is beautiful.
Yeah, this was done as a commission from my grandmother. It was painted for her, in memory of her and my grandfather. My grandmother was organist of her church for 50 years.
Wow.
My grandfather was choir director of his church
now, how
for
long
35
did this take
years.
you to do?
If you include the drawings and the studies, it took probably 9 months.
Wow.
Working full-time, 8 hours a day.
That's
6 days a week.
That's wonderful. Well, it shows in the quality of your work. Your love for this came from your mother, I understand. Right.
I grew up in a Christian home. I was surrounded by beautiful things. My mother had impeccable taste. Everything was just arranged beautifully. Had selections of books, the classics, and from reading the classics and looking at the pictures, I really got my first love for the visual arts, seeing the reproductions in books.
And when did you realize that God had given you a gift in this area?
I didn't realize that it was from God, unfortunately, when I was a young boy. But when I was in 3rd grade, I made the decision to be a visual artist, that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, was to paint pictures. And
as you went through school, eventually you began to embrace the whole philosophy of evolution. And how did that impact the faith that you'd been raised with?
Well, I gradually lost my faith. I probably didn't have a lot there to begin with. I was just growing up in a Christian home, surrounded by it, went to church. I read the New Testament, I read the book of Acts, and I thought to myself, you know, this isn't the way it is today. It just, I don't see this in my church. I don't see it around me. I don't see people being prayed for who are sick, who are healed. You know, I don't see that reality in people's lives. Evolution destroyed my faith in God as creator. So by the time I got out of high school and into college, I was pretty much an agnostic. I went to church but didn't really believe it.
How did you get to the place where you even considered taking your own life?
I went through a very painful divorce, and I committed adultery. And I'd been to church enough to hear the 10 Commandments. And what kept going, this little recorder in my mind was saying, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not commit adultery. And I went into severe depression, and it got to the point where I was suicidal. And eventually I tried to take my life. I was working in a studio that had gas jets. It used to be a dentist's office. I tried them, smelled them, and they worked. I felt so bad. I mean, felt so guilty and depressed that I couldn't stand it anymore, and I wanted to take my life. So I turned on the gas and was almost dead. It was like the rheostat of my life was going down, and instantly the air cleared, became crystal clear. The gas stopped coming out of the jet, and Jesus was standing in front of me. And I knew who he was. He didn't say anything. I knew exactly who he was. I knew that he had died for my sin in my place. I didn't need to kill myself, which is what I was doing. I was killing myself for my own sin. That he had taken that sin on himself, that he'd suffered separation from God in my behalf, and that if I put my faith...
So his presence brought that spiritual knowledge to you.
It was just like my mind was opened up. I knew the Bible was true. I knew who he was. I knew that I needed him.
Wow.
And he said one thing to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, follow me. I'll make something of your life. And I just said, Lord, I will.
It's what he says to every one of us, isn't it?
By his grace, I've been following him ever since.
Wow. How did that experience change your life? I mean, obviously, it's
I would have been dead.
How does it impact this?
You know, I was very fortunate in that I was saved right at the beginning of my career. I have no regrets in my art. I don't have any pictures that I have to go back and say, you know, I wish I hadn't painted that because I wasn't glorifying the Lord. I was able to give my life and my art as well to the Lord right from the very beginning of my career.
What do you hope to do as a Christian artist? I guess the question I want to ask is how do we make the arts an area that's glorifying to God?
That's a good question. It starts with each individual artist. Every Christian has to dedicate themselves to the Lord, and they have to dedicate what they do to the Lord. And it's not just we dedicate everything. You know, the housewife dedicates her housework. The artist dedicates their art to the Lord. They pray about their art. They fast about their art. And they take it very seriously. This is a ministry to the artist. Their vocation is a ministry. And the church has to see that as a viable ministry as well as the other ministries.
Why should we be concerned about the arts as Christians?
The arts are one of the most powerful means of communication that we have, obviously, or you wouldn't be doing television here. A visual work, I mean, people think in visual images. They see things in their mind visually. A visual image is very powerful. That's why movies are very powerful. That's why things people see are very powerful. So we use them as a means of communication to communicate the truth.
Where is your work on display right now? Where can people see what you've done?
I don't exhibit very much. Right now, there's an exhibit of my work and 4 other artists at the Newington Cropsey Foundation in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, just south of Dobbs Ferry, just north of Yonkers on the Hudson River. I have 21 of my paintings there. That's the most that anyone will ever see of my work in one location at one time.
Thank you so much, Stephen Gjertson, for being with us.
Thank you,
God bless
pleasure.
you. You're a gift of mine. We'll be back in just a moment.